In a moment of silence. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Cherry, can you please do roll call?
Todd? Erica?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Art? Here. Craig?
Present.
Jeff?
We'll be here soon.
Jill? Here. Jerry here.
Okay, this is an open meeting and has been noticed as such. First up, we have citizens' comments. Okay. All right, principal presentations. You're on deck.
Stephanie Blue, Stephanie, you can go first, right? Yeah, so Stephanie Blue, our new principal at Prairie View Elementary. Oh, it's up there already.
Good evening.
Hi, Steph.
Good evening.
So thank you for letting me be here tonight to talk about the great things happening at Prairie View during this school year and to do some looking ahead to next school year. So when I was interviewed and got the job at Prairie View, one of the first things that I did was sat down with all of the staff members, custodians, secretaries, instructional aides, and staff members to talk about some things, and I heard loud and clear at that time how much they loved some of the traditions that are really good for students and staff and community members at Prairie
Talk into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
That's okay.
That's right. Okay. And so this slide just presents the fact that I did stick to that. We still did our extravaganza crack-off at Easter time. We did our staff play. I got to play Barbie. My own children have still not stopped laughing at the pictures of that. The kindergarten did their Wild Thing parades, and we did our PTO fundraiser, the Panther Prowl, which is also promotes exercise and being fit and active. So those are some of the things that we continued this year. We also continued wanting to educate the whole child, not just the academic portion. And so we did this year, our focus for the social nature of the children was to take a look at manners matter. And every month we had a focus, and we went through and talked about the importance of greeting people in the morning and saying please and thank you and respecting other people's boundaries, and concentrated on those things every month. And then looked for those things in the hallway and gave praise, positive reinforcement when we saw those things happening. Some activities that we did this year. The first one was our art show. Mrs. Engelking did a phenomenal job. Our theme this year in the building was Fish Just Keep Swimming. And so she did our art show before one of our 1st through 3rd grade choir concerts around this, and you can see some pictures there. The bottom one on the more left-hand side, you can see she did like a transparent material that hung from our lights with turtles swimming in it. Our building was packed for that and did a wonderful job. Community relations, important at Prairie View, and so we in the fall had the North Prairie Fire Department come in, and they did a whole day of activities at Fire Prevention Week, where they did obstacle courses outside for the kids. They brought all their fire trucks, an ambulance. The kindergartners went through that. I got to wear a scuba diving gear for the kids. And then they also did an art show. So you can see our kindergartners up there with some of their artwork from that competition. We continued our Coins for Kids, where we raised $1,400 for the Waukesha Christmas Clearing Council. And our student advisory members went and bought toys for that, and then we delivered them to the council. And then our 6th grader continued, I think the 2nd year in a row that Mr. Christensen took them to Mud Run for Cancer for the MAC Fund. And they did that in the spring. Yeah, they are muddy. I wanted to give you an update on our Best Buddies, because I'm sure you remember that Prairie View Elementary School was one of the first charters for Best Buddies program as an elementary school in the state. And so we did our first full year of that this year. Mrs. Messer and Mrs. Buccanero did a wonderful job. We had monthly meetings, K through 6 students. It was truly one of my favorite evenings of each month to go to this activity and watch the kids collaborate and worked on critical thinking skills and communicate with one another. The elementary chapter is a little bit different than the secondary chapter because they're not paired up with a buddy, but they all meet together and then do these activities around this, and heard really good feedback from the parents, and excited to see what they do in year 2 with that. We do a variety show every other year at Prairie View, and besides the wonderful talent of the students that we saw this year, we did something a little bit new. Our student advisory team always ends the variety show with a number. This year I talked to the staff. I don't think they knew what they were getting into, but I talked the staff into doing the evolution of dance. And so you'll see a couple pictures. Top right-hand side is Mrs. Wagner and one of our instructional aides, Mrs. Kulo, doing Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. And we went through the decades of dance. The kids loved it. The gym was so loud during that time. It was very fun. And then just some things that bring learning in many different ways at Prairie View. We brought in an author this year, Marla McKenna. She's a local author, so she brought her books and read to the students. I think it's so incredibly important for the students to be exposed to authentic authors and to talk to people who do this for a living, talk to them about their writing process and the fact that they actually draft and revise and change things. So she met with each class, and it was a great experience for the kids. The next picture is an all-school science challenge that we did. So getting into some STEM activities. Students were given a challenge with a straw and paper, and they had to make something to see how far it would go. And so all of the classes went to the hallway for the day, and we measured all day long. PTO ran that. Our first graders at the end of the year did a poetry cafe, so parents were invited in. The classroom was set up with tables and fake candles, and there was a stage, and those first graders got up and talked into a microphone and did a great job. It was so fun to see their learning and growth at the end of this year. And then finally, we had another thing is we had a meteorologist come to talk to our third graders about their science unit with the weather. And so just ways that we try to bring in other kinds of learning to Prairie View. As far as school goals are concerned, we had a school goal this year around reading. We started at 69.7% of our students at or above reading, which was lower than previous years, and we had a great goal of hitting 87%, which would have been pretty phenomenal. An average growth for reading starting the year this way would have been about a 10% growth. We received a 12% growth, and one of the things that I was really glad to see is there's often the winter scores are the highest, and then there's kind of a dip in the spring. You'll see that a little bit with our math scores. With our reading, that was not the case. In this winter, we weren't satisfied with where we were ending, would not have been satisfied if that was our ending point, so really dug into some of the achievement gaps and why some students weren't growing, and did get a little over a 12% gain in the course of the year. So even though we didn't meet a pretty lofty goal, we were pleased with where things ended. In math then, we started out the year 86.12%, again a little bit lower than we had started out in the fall in the past. And if you're above 85%, a 5-year growth is really probably what you're shooting for, and our staff decided to go for a 95 because it's hard to say only 90% of our students are going to be proficient, so we went for the 95%. Still had a good solid growth, but we ended the year at 91.7% proficient and hit a peak in the winter at 91.84%. And then our third school goal that we had was involved writing. Looking forward to the writing workshop for 3-6 this next year. And so we really concentrated greatly on organization, but also ideas this year. We did an all-school read, or not an all-school read with kids, but the staff did a read around a book called How's It Going, to talk about writing conferring, which will be a big part of bringing in workshop this next year. And so we saw some good growth between the 2015-16 and 2016-17 school year with our writing. Definitely see that it's headed in the right direction. And then just some things looking ahead for Prairie View. On August 11th, we will put in a playground that the PTO has been saving for about 4 years. And they're going to replace a big section of our playground. So we introduced that to the kids on the very last day. Again, a time the gym was incredibly noisy as they saw that structure, and parents will be coming in to do a build for that on August 11th. Did a lot of hiring this year. Starting in about March, we will have new, and we finished last week, 10 new staff members to Prairie View, and I feel very, very strongly that as an administrator, the most important job, hands down, that I will do is bringing in good staff members, and staff members that will stay and do great jobs for our kids. So, like I said, we started in March, we'll finish last week, but I'm sad that we had as many retirements that we did, lost some great teachers, but I feel so good about the 10 new staff members coming in. they'll be a great addition to our building. Literacy implementation that I'm sure all of the elementary school principals are talking about. Our goals next year will really be surrounding reading and writing. We already had a group in a couple weeks ago. Group of teachers are coming in again this Thursday to solidify those goals. But we really want to look at addressing our achievement gaps with reading. So the kids that aren't necessarily moving, what are we going to do differently for those students with some of our new literacy practices coming in? And then finally, we are looking to reconceptualize our library a little bit as learning spaces, more hands-on, active learning, bringing in some STEM things. So I was able to do a hire of a new LTS that is so on board with my vision for that. She actually has already turned in a 3-year vision for our library. She's a go-getter, and turned in a 3-year vision for our library. As part of kind of knowing the direction that I wanted to go with that, I wrote for a grant with GE this year and received the grant. And so Prairie View will be receiving 2 3D printers and all the materials to support those printers heading into next year. So we start in a good place with that space. So I look forward to digging in at Prairie View. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be at Prairie View. I had a great year, and so I'm enjoying being in the district. So thank you.
Congratulations on the grant. Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, exciting. We're going to look for more of those opportunities.
All right. Any questions? All right.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thanks.
Up next is Mike Marincic, new principal at Rolling Hills.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Hi, Mike.
So I was just going to replay Stephanie's, but I figured I should do something a little bit different. So Rolling Hills, year in review for this past year. This next slide really signifies my year. So if you're familiar, that's a parachute. And I had a great mentor of mine, a really good friend that I met years back, that said your first year in any new building is a year spent packing your parachute. You're jumping out of an airplane and you don't quite know what to expect, and so that whole year is really spent, how will year 2 go? And luckily, the parachute did open because I did come after a few, really nice administrators, 2 of which are in this room. So the first day of school was, of course, a all-school selfie. A parent at the end of the year bought me a selfie stick because she said it was not a very good angle. But I'm definitely a person that likes to have fun, and it was great to start off a year with so many wonderful students. I felt extremely welcomed in the building from the staff and families. So that's how we began the year. Again, going back to some of what Stephanie said with traditions, Rolling Hills is steeped in tradition, and one of the first ones that I experienced was the turkey trot. And if you kind of know, that goes all the way out to the park, walks through, and each class kind of has their own little posters, but a really neat event for students to get out and get together with their classrooms. We followed that with numerous concerts. The top left was the Bugs. Then we had We Are Family with our first and second, and then some of you maybe attended the A Pirate's Christmas with our 5th and 6th, which was a very fun concert. Miss Deck was finishing up her first year this year and did a really nice job with those musicals, so it was definitely fun to see those performances. Another big feature that I walked into as a really neat thing was with 4th grade was Scribe. And this was something where a 4th grade class would actually go up to the nursing home, and they would partner up with different members of that club and would write together. You can kind of see there's a little book, it was Emotions, and they would write stories about different themes each time that they met monthly. I was able to go and visit during one of their kind of final send-offs where the kids did presentations, and it was just a really neat thing to see the community come together. It was funny that when I was talking to Mrs. Herrera, who's heading that up, one of our 4th grade teachers, there was an article that came out that said the importance of kids really talking with the elderly and making those connections. And so I know last year was her first year taking that over, and we're looking at how can we expand it to all of 4th grade. So right now her class is Who Does It, and management-wise it's kind of what worked out, but she saw the importance of it for her group, and I know the other 4th grade teachers would love to continue something like that. We had numerous contests, spelling bee, geography bee, the school speech, as well as Battle of the Books. And it was, you just see the students so excited to participate in these events, and they work so hard. I think back to some of my own contest days, and I would pale into comparison of how they prepare for these events. And again, just really neat things that the district offers in Rolling Hills as well. One of my favorites, and I was never a basketball person, Sean knows this because, you know, as fellow wrestlers, I was never very tall, but the student versus staff basketball game was a great opportunity for me to make up for all of those times that I got beat, because we crushed the kids. No, we had to scale back. We had a great time. We have a fun group of teachers that were excited to be a part of that. And if you know our 6th grade group, they can be a little chippy. And so it was nice to have a very friendly competition and have the rest of the school cheer us on as we go. So just a really neat thing that we had right around spring break time. And another feature that we've seen in a lot of the other buildings is the One Book, One School. Mrs. Koopman, our library services teacher, did a wonderful job picking out. She had a group last year go through some different stories, and they said, you know what, we really trust your direction, and so she chose the Boxcar Children, which you probably all remember as a favorite when you were kids, because this story is very, very old. I forget what year, in the 50s, I think. And it's one that I remember having series to go through. Yeah, I apologize, meaning all of you were in school at that time, so don't take offense. You have to keep that in mind here. It might have even been earlier than that. Should we keep digging this hole, Mr. Rykoff? But I did have quite a good number of board representation to come and read to our students, so I appreciate that when we did invite you out. But the big reveal was probably the neatest aspect of this, and that's where the kids really don't have any clue of what's going to happen, and you know, we kind of put on a little bit of a skit, and they get to see the book. And at first, you know, they don't quite know what to expect, but I think when you talked with each of the grade levels, they really did enjoy the story. It has a great message of students, you know, of some children surviving on their own and using what they have around them to do that. And I think Art even put a plug in for those tiny homes. So I think some students are going to be joining our CTE later on to do some tiny home building. So thank you, Art, for that. One of the other a really neat thing that was going on in our building was the 4th grade Immigration Day. And that's where 4th graders would actually be given a name. They follow this person as they go across the Atlantic into America. And they have to dress up as that character. That top left corner, Mr. McNulty, myself, and Mr. Rykoff were going to let people in or send them to detention. And I think Mr. Rykoff had a great time doing that. But Mr. McNulty, he did not hold back. If they didn't know who what their name was or where they're from or how they're going to make it in America, they headed quick to detention. But you can see, and I think that bottom middle corner where the line of students are sitting, they're waiting to be allowed back in line to see if they can make it in. And when you talk to the kids about this experience, they, I think, had a glimpse of how hard it was going to be for them, you know, for someone to make it into America. And I think that in itself was a pretty neat experience. So another neat traditional thing going on at Rolling Hills. And of course, then we ended the year with our field day and new games day. Our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders participate in the field day, where it's kind of like a track and field event, and our kindergarten through 3rd grade do the new games day, where people put together different games that they can play. The culminating event, you can see Mrs. Herrera's in that bottom left picture, is the mile run. I'm probably laying on the ground somewhere. I did finish, but I am very out of shape than I used to be. But a really neat way for us to end the school year on a very positive note. Moving into a little bit of data, as we know is important as well. Our STAR data in the fall, we had 69% of our students at or above benchmark as measured by STAR. In our mid-year, and I know Mrs. Blue did a great job kind of explaining this, it usually is the time that we peak. You know, it's right at the January time, they're really hitting their stride. So we were at 80%. And in spring, we went down just slightly, but we still made our goal of a 10% increase from fall to spring. So we were very proud of the students, and I was very proud of the teachers for the hard work that they put into it. Again, as Ms. Blue talked about the different adoptions with literacy, we only hope to see these scores continue to grow. And I think with students having that ownership of their learning, we're going to see that. So still very proud to be able to meet that goal for reading. Math, again, the district is historically very strong in math. And we started off with 82% of our students at or above. In the mid-year, we had really great numbers to reach up to 91%. And again, that little bit of, springtime, the kids are seeing the light as well. We did dip down a little bit, but we still reached our goal of, we were looking for a 5% increase. So we did meet it. We made 6%. And again, something we'll continue to chip away at as we move forward. One other piece that I put forth in our building was the parent satisfaction survey. And that's something that in my previous lives and in different places, you always have to worry if you ask the question, you have to be ready for the response. And I'm a person that I need those responses for me to grow. And so I did send out a survey, and I have results that I could share out. But the scorecard, it was just with, I think, a handful of questions. I know this is extremely tiny, but it goes from, my child's learning is a high priority at Rolling Hills, all the way to a question of the principal at Rolling Hills is an effective leader. This is an example of the scorecard. So what you do is you kind of disaggregate your data and find out a mean score when you give each rating of strongly agree, disagree, kind of a qualifier. And the next steps to this then, and like I said, I'll make sure that all of you have a copy of this, but for the purposes of this, Tom told me I needed to be short, so I won't get all into it. But we really wanted to work to celebrate wins and ask for input and ways to improve. And that's exactly what we did. Survey went through a month towards the end of the school year. We had about a 30% response rate. So for an external survey, those of you that are survey methodologists, you'll know that's really good. Usually you'll get about 10 to 15%. So the parents responded, and that was great because it gives us a better sampling of where we can move as a building. What you do then from this, and this is what we're looking at towards the beginning of this next school year, is to create an action plan. And so what that kind of entails is taking your lowest areas and looking at how you can improve and what stakeholders you need to involve. So for us, our bottom three, and we actually had one that kind of ties in, so receiving positive phone calls, notes, or emails about my child from school, regularly receiving feedback from school staff on how well my child is learning. School rules, discipline plans are enforced consistently at Rolling Hills, and my child is recognized for good work and behavior at school. And so one of those, and you'll see kind of in the next step, we are implementing for our first full year PBIS, which again, it's in pockets of different buildings, but that positive behavior interventions and supports. And that was really to kind of hit that question of the discipline being effective and enforced consistently. The other ones are things that we'll work on as a staff to figure out how do we better communicate, because it was loud and clear on the survey that parents didn't feel like they were getting enough. And so is it that we were giving them stuff, but it wasn't what they were looking for? So that's what we're going to dig into as we begin next year. And then again, you kind of talk about measures. How will you measure this works? Typically, you do this survey 2 to 3 times a year. And so we'll look at maybe doing one mid-year to see if we're reaching our goals. And that stoplight is just, red, yellow, green as you kind of go through. And then another big change you may have seen on Twitter or Facebook, we did update the logo. If you can remember, I had some links here. The original one, I'll have to log back out. It was the Raptor, and I think it looked a lot like the Toronto Raptors, but pretty awesome student-drawn one. And then I know we had another one that was the Flying RH, so it looked a lot like the McGuanago High School. And so what I did is I enlisted our 6th grade, 4th, 5th, and 6th student council to re-envision this logo. And Mrs. Falk worked well with the students, and we were able to give their ideas to one of our Jostens reps, and this is what they ended up coming out with. So students were really excited, staff is very excited, and we're excited to move forward rebranding. So everything coming out of us is going to be really proud of our new logo as we go through. And then next steps, just so again, school-wide PBIS implementation to hit that positive behavior and being very consistent throughout the building. Again, increasing positive communication, so good notes home. One thing that I challenge myself to do is to do a good call home where I find a student that's doing something great and have them call parents and make a really big deal about it, trying to do that weekly as well. Implementation of our new literacy programs. I know Mrs. Blue and she mentioned how excited she is. I very much am excited for the new literacy programs that are coming in and seeing how the staff and students respond to it. Again, we're going to look at our next year, have a school goal around writing, knowing that that's our first implementation of the literacy, and just really continuing to build strong relationships with our stakeholders. I know Mr. McNulty talks a lot about relationships, and that's very important to me. Last year, again, packing my parachute, having to kind of learn the building, get to know people, that's very important, and I'll continue to do that. And hopefully, I packed it well enough so that when I jump out in the fall, it'll open up. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good job, Mike.
Thank you.
Anybody have a question?
Questions?
Mike? All right, great.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Well done.
Good job.
Okay, we're not gonna have a student rep report tonight. We're moving on to the consent agenda. We have approval of board minutes of June 26, 2017, and approval of vouchers numbers 113221 to 113503 and funds 10, 21, 23, 27, 41, 45, 49, 50, 72, and 80, totaling 1.9 million and change. And receipts for June 2017 in funds 10, 21, 27, 41, 50, and 72, totaling 9 million and change. Are there any questions or concerns regarding these? Okay, hearing none, it's approved by consent. On to action items. First up is resignations, retirements, and appointments.
So we have an updated sheet at the table. The resignation, one resignation for tonight, that's Scott Perkins, middle school counselor.
Why did he leave?
So I can talk about that later.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Nothing bad. I don't want to give anyone that impression now that I said that. No. So he's
Okay.
gonna, I can tell you that he has decided to leave teaching and go work for the Autism Project. I can fill you in more later. Yeah, it's very good. So, and I believe he's still gonna stay coaching with us.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve that. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, appointments.
So we have several, and again, we have the updated sheet at your table, so we have 6 more than we had. Nick has been working hard, along with our new Human Resources Director that started today, Susan Minter. So we have David Barriere, Special Education at McGuanago High School, Heather Close, Counselor at Parkview Middle School, Brita Kraus, Counselor at Big Bend and Prairie View, Caitlin Duranzo, Kindergarten at Prairie View, Adam Hackbarth, General Music at Eagleville and Prairie View, Jessica Jensen, Special Ed at McGuanago High School, Michael Pesky, STEM at Parkview, Sheila Meineke, Math at Parkview, Abe Nelson, Ed Tech at Parkview, Christine Peterson, Health Sciences at McGuanago High School, Kaylin Schultes, Language Arts at Parkview, Audra Stanislawski, Special Education at Clarendon, and Lisa Zick at Special Ed at Parkview.
Okay.
So a lot going on.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right. On to 2017-18 academic standards.
So every year, based on recent legislation, the school board has to act on our adopted standards. We have to adopt standards in 4 areas: English language arts, math, science, and geography and history. But ever since this legislation went into place, we have published all of our standards. There's no reason not to. This went to the Learning Committee 2 weeks ago, and I just bring it before you now for formal approval. We haven't changed any of our standards. You may have noted, as I touched base on the memo, that actually between the Learning Committee and today, the state released the state standards in computer science. I did add them to the list. There's no reason why we wouldn't use those standards. But I put them on there just with all of you knowing that we obviously are in the process then of looking at the standards and exactly which standards align to which courses. So we haven't done that work yet because they were just released. But I would just put this before you for final approval, and then we'll post it on the website as directed by the legislation.
Okay. Yeah, motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no? All right, moving on. Fund 46 transfer.
Okay, so we've talked about this for a little while now, and at this point in time, I'm recommending that we transfer $1.4 million to Fund 46 from Fund 10. It'll increase our equalization aid over not doing this, and puts us in a great spot for all things buildings, maintenance, sites, facilities, and otherwise.
All right,
I'd like to make a motion, we move forward.
all right. Motion second, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. Next up, 17-18, transportation rates.
All right, then on page 8, I have our proposal for a 2.5% rate increase over last year's amounts. We've talked about this again for quite some time, so if you don't have any questions, I recommend that we go with this.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, any discussion? Go ahead.
Disappointment, but understanding. They get it. They know that starting out this school year is going to be looked at and reviewed, and if those things go well, we can consider adding that. So it was understood.
All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? All right, motion carries. Friends of McGuanago Athletics Project.
Okay, Kurt's here tonight to walk us through this project, which was discussed at the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting last month, or earlier this month, excuse me, but we also talked about it at the board meeting last month. And Chris Walker and others from FOMA are here also.
All right, so initially we brought this to the board meeting back in May as far as the front entrance to the football field. FOMA expressed interest in partnering with the school district to improve that area as their next project. A couple of the questions that the board had back then we followed up on and have responses for. One of the questions was, what has other school districts done that have built these type of entrances? And there was 2 districts that we reached out to understand what type of donations and donors and fundraising that they were able to get for their projects. Oconomowoc and Franklin. Oconomowoc was able to raise $1.1 million. They had more than just their front entrance that they were raising for. They were raising for athletic facilities as well. But they identified these donors on a donor wall and had some naming rights with their facility as well. So it was similar. Franklin did a similar project as well, where they had donor recognition on their entrance. They were able to raise $932,000. So I think the idea of the question, why the board had asked that question, was just to kind of get an idea of what the potential is out there, knowing that these projects aren't exactly like ours. The second thing was to firm up costs. So we initially, back in 2015, when FOMA first expressed interest and started talking about what will the next project be after they get the turf paid off, which, by the way, the turf is pretty well paid off. They have their funds in the bank. They're just basically looking at their next big event. Do you know what that event is that you're going to?
FOMA Fest on September 23rd.
So September 23rd, they're going to be issuing their last check to the district to pay off that turf project, which is great. Like, that was 2 years, and we initially talked about 5 years for them. So just a little over 2 years, they've been able to pay that balance down. So back in 2015, I put a budget together off of a sketch, basically, that Bray Architects put together, and reached out to a couple of the major trades, actual subcontractors, to get numbers from them. Back then we put a budget of $300,000 out, with C.G. Schmidt doing the other work on site. we, once this project started getting legs again, we reached back out to them a couple months ago and said, just give us your budget. Now, they didn't price it out with their subcontractors, they just used their in-house estimating department. They came in at $387,000, so higher than the initial $300,000 budget. After looking at what they had priced and how they priced it, and with the subcontractors that we priced it, I'm confident that going forward, we can design to that $300,000 budget. So sticking with that original budget that we had. The other thing that ties in with that is because the referendum work has work happening around that area, those pieces such as the concrete for the sidewalk, the asphalt, that's already in the referendum project, so we're having some savings there as well. So the third thing was really figuring out that fundraising structure, how the project would get paid. Leaving that meeting in May, the board meeting, I came away with kind of 3 goals that I was kind of understanding or hearing that the board, and that I kind of put into goals, I guess, from based on the feedback that I was hearing. One of them was that there was interest to allow FOMA, based on their past history of partnering with the district and fundraising for the turf, fundraising for a softball field, fitness center, and locker room, all in the last 4 or so years. Based on that past history of them being great partners, there was interest in seeing if we can make something work with FOMA. The second thing was to take advantage of the timing of the referendum project. So rather than doing the sidewalk that's currently called out in the project and then ripping it out, doing the asphalt that's called out, doing the fencing around it, doing all that now, and then 3-4 years down the road do this project and remove what we just put in, rather than doing that, seeing if we can get these projects to tie together. So that was a goal that I heard. And the third was to fund this project ideally without using school funds. And with FOMA and with their great board and put our heads together, figuring out how they can do that. They looked at, one, the amount that they bring in on their annual fundraising efforts with FOMA Fest, applying those funds to it. And then the second way is to take this new front entrance that will look very attractive and use similar concepts like Oconomowoc and Franklin, how they made that a display area for donor recognition or for naming rights. So that's how they would fund the project, is to go out and use the connections that they have, the great connections that they have in the community, to raise money through whether it's naming rights for the field itself, or not the field, but the complex, or raising for specific areas of the new entrance. So whether it be brick pavers, the pillars themselves having donor signs on there in an attractive way, bleacher signage, the naming of the concession stand. So when this was last talked about in 2015, the board was acceptable to the naming rights piece, and so FOMA put together a brochure back in 2015. If you remember seeing that, it really ties in. There's very few tweaks from this, so it's really taking what they put together in 2015, and now that we are close to the end of paying off the field, and kind of taking that momentum of that last check of the field that's going towards the field, taking that momentum, putting what they already put together with a couple of tweaks, and taking that momentum and going into this next project. So that's the plan of what they have. So I guess what we're looking for is direction from the board, if they're acceptable for FOMA to take that next step and start marketing this as it was included on this sheet, and I also included in the packet the different areas where they would have those donor signs and different opportunities. There's certainly more areas than we expect that they would actually sell. If they sell all those, it'd be great. They would raise well over the money needed for the front entrance. Which brings up another good point that they also talked about if they end up raising, as part of this, raising up more than the 300,000, that extra funds as part of this project could go into help put in like a maintenance fund for the turf or whatever it may whatever else we may want for the maintenance fund. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Jeff,
I was just gonna mention what you just mentioned, as far as, don't forget that money raised beyond the cost for doing the entrance would be used for maintenance or replacement of the turf field that, when and if the time comes, that needs to be done.
When we, when they did the turf originally, Jeff, the board agreed that the maintenance would be a separate issue, but I can see how you guys wanna keep helping. That's awesome. Awesome.
Any other questions?
I just have one that's not really related to this, but how come we eliminated the second concession stand?
It's really hasn't been in use, with the main one, and correct me, Cheryl, if I'm wrong here, since Cheryl runs the concession stand. That one was always sponsored, I think, by the Key Club.
Correct.
For a long time, and then that, because of the new concession stand, I guess they saw some of their business going away, and it didn't make wasn't enough for them, or they stopped wanting to be a part of that, so that second concession stand, the older one, just in essence kinda got closed down, and all we're doing is using the newer concession stand. So,
And it was in really bad shape. I mean, I think the master plan or, long range, if we ever run into money or whatever, set up for another concession stand there.
Plus, they couldn't staff it. They had no help.
Well, I would just like, I mean, just from what I experienced and whatever, I would like it would be looked into, cause that concession stand, other different groups could do it, and I don't know how it fell apart or how the communication fell apart, but I know at the game, I would think it maybe wouldn't be as popular as the one at one end, but it seemed to always have people at it. I know when one of the advisors left, so I don't know, I just think that it would be beneficial to look into revitalizing that end of cause that's where the visitors are, and so
We don't want to make them comfortable.
well, yes, we do, we want their money.
Haven't you been at
Arrowhead.
So that's something that Andy Trudell and Brian can talk about, and we can come back with a report
Cause I
on
would think it
that.
would maybe give more opportunities for more groups to,
Sure,
I mean,
we can bring that
even if
back.
it's not as lucrative, it still would be more than they're getting now. I don't.
Cheryl, you're ready to
We can take a
on
look at that.
Second concession stand, right?
No, let's not go down that road.
So that's an Andy Trudell, another day question.
Right. Yeah, we
Okay.
appreciate Cheryl's efforts now. We don't want to
Absolutely.
drive her away.
And I'm not, that's
don't
what
wanna
I'm
burn
saying,
her
it had
out.
nothing to do with it, but it was always,
Yeah.
Cause it's now,
Can you
all
talk in the
those
mic?
different people in there are who, you run it, but who,
all different.
Various different groups.
Soccer.
right, all different sports, but there's no other groups like the drama and all those kind of groups that would maybe be interested in.
They're all welcome, I mean, if they step up and ask,
Andy Trudell
Yep.
to whoever initiates it and who gets
all
it.
of them.
They have conditions, they
Mhm.
have to do a small
Yeah,
game to
right.
get a big game, they can't get just varsity games, they gotta do other events that bring in $20 versus $2,000. So
'Cause
it's very, he keeps pretty good.
he's activities director, so you would.
Then I
be
guess
talking to him.
my question is directed to
Right.
Andy, if you'd.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
So,
We can do that.
Just a quick question too, Kurt. Do we have to use CG Smith for a project of this size? Is that something that I know you're consulting with us, is something you could do and we could save more
Yeah,
on
that's-
the rate versus a CG Smith rate? Cause I think they might be able to overkill
Yeah.
on a project like this.
And that would be the strategy. So where I say we would design to the 300,000 and make that our budget, so we have that as not a moving target. We would design to that. The first thing when we get that design, I'll have them price it out, but I'll also price it out as well. So if it ends up being a savings in what we need to do to get us to do it in-house, we'll do it in-house. So really, we'll do what we have to do to make that $300,000 work.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion?
Make a motion that we approve.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right, do I have a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no? All right, motion carries. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you.
a lot.
Next up is Neola policy update.
All right, in the packet there on pages 14 through 17, we have 2 Neola policies there. The first one relates to our food service program, and there's some changes that are coming from Neola and some other changes that we need to use in order to keep receiving the federal assistance within our food service program that we currently get. Again, the big issue, just to remind everyone here, we did talk about this in June or so. We have to post and notify parents on how our alternative lunch program works. It's same along the lines as how we have to make sure everybody receives information about applying for free and reduced lunches. So we need the board to adopt this policy here for the food service 8500, and then we will create the internal administrative guidelines on how we will go about doing that.
So, and just so we're clear, as far as procedure, you can waive the first reading. If you're not comfortable with that, we're okay with that. We're going to create the administrative guidelines that Tom shared with you in June. If you recall, when we talked about if there is a student that does not have money in their lunch account, we're not going to turn them away. We're still going to feed them. Remember that discussion?
Yes.
So we'll have those official administrative guidelines, how we're going to proceed, and then we'll share that with parents. So if you don't feel comfortable approving these 2 policies tonight, you don't want to waive the first reading, you want to wait until August, that's fine. But we're going to move forward with those administrative guidelines, which you were okay with last month.
Okay. I'm comfortable waiving the first reading. I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion?
I do have a quick question.
Yep.
Right at the top of 8500, it's cut out, the board shall also provide a breakfast program. Is that no longer required, or is it put someplace else?
So it's not required, and the only place that we provide breakfast is at McGuanago High School. So Neola recommended that we take that out because it's not, the board isn't requiring us to have a breakfast program. We offer it at the high school.
But it's staying, we're keeping that.
Yeah, there's no change in there.
Okay.
As far as the
Just not a
breakfast program? Yeah,
requirement.
we're keeping it.
Okay. All right, anyone else? All right, all those in favor of waiving the first reading, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, now we need a motion to approve.
I'll motion.
What did we put the, okay, is that a
Just hold
discussion?
on. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, no discussion?
What did we put for the minimum? Because wasn't there a discussion on what the minimum was, or how?
The minimum negative balance?
Right.
It was
$10.
$10.
$10. There will be notifications occurring all the way into reaching 0, reaching -5, reaching -10, and at -10 is where action takes place.
So, I guess the question, more than just the dollars, how much is a meal? Do you know what I mean? How much is the hot lunch now?
I have to look back. I don't.
$2.85?
Yeah.
So that's 3 lunch, if you're behind 3 lunches, that's what this would be?
They'll be contacting the parents earlier than that.
As we talked about last month.
Trust me, I am well aware, I am on the list, so I know, but I just didn't know if we should, instead of, because we said $10, if we should do, like, let's say someone gets paid on the 15th, if we should do a week's worth of lunch. So that was my only thing at the time, and so that's why I wondered if we had decided, so if you do 5 lunches so that they got paid on that Friday and they could put their money in, if that is indeed the reason, and it's not because Art didn't do it or whatever reason we had. But I just thought maybe that would be the number to use instead of that $10. That was my thought.
So the
process.
10 was recommended by Pam Harris, our food service director, correct?
Yes, and this is for non-free and reduced students. So this doesn't pertain to free and reduced students. Will always
I understand that, but some people, even though they're not free and reduced, are still on the one paycheck to the next paycheck kind of thing. And so it would be, if we said $3, okay, that would be $15 instead of 10. So I was just throwing it out there because that would be 1 week's, and then you had a whole week to catch up, and that was.
Does that change something?
Yeah, how do
No.
they
Severely for
manage
you
that?
guys, or what?
Is it harder for her to track that?
We'd have to ask Pam, and so we can do that, and we can bring it back to finance and facilities. Again, that's an administrative guideline that actually we don't have
That's not
Right,
in
right.
this.
So that-
approval.
right,
So we
so I'm
can,
just
we
saying
can
it-
take a look at that,
And
sure.
to see that would maybe be.
So, yeah, I think we can, if you guys are comfortable, we can pass this policy here and we can tweak what we do internally
That
from
one.
10 to 15
Right.
or whatever.
Right. Well,
Sure.
that's what,
We'll
that's
take
what
a
I
look
was
at it.
saying when you- Yeah.
Correct. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries.
More money you guys gotta collect.
Yeah.
You can't write it off anymore.
But some are only just an allowance.
All right, next up is Dousman Transport GPS pilot.
All right, on page 18, we talked about the GPS pilot that we're interested in doing. We have 2 layers of the technology. We'd like to move forward with this and pursue this. We think it's a great idea.
Sounds totally cool.
So it was something that I had seen in a couple other districts, for example, Racine, the ability for parents to see where their son or daughter's bus was on the route, especially in the morning, but in the afternoon could be a concern too when they're getting dropped off. As you know, sometimes we have some pretty nasty cold weather, and it would be nice for parents to be able to see where that bus is, so their son or daughter's not waiting, especially if the bus is running late. Sometimes it's running a little early, and if you can look on your phone app and see where the bus is at, it might limit the number of people that are missing the bus or waiting out there too long.
I think this would be really good, seeing that we never close school. Mr. Freeze over there. So I think this compensates for his lack of compassion.
All right, so you're making the motion?
Yes.
All right. All right, any second? All right, any other discussion?
Question, this
Yes.
Safe Stop app, I'm assuming it's a free app, but can we get it put into or linked to the MASD app?
We are
We have
in
lots of-
the,
Oh, go ahead.
we're calling this a pilot because we those are things we need to investigate. We're gonna take a long look at everything. I can't answer that question yet.
I would really hate to say, yeah, I wanna give it a try, but then say, oh, and it's a $4.99 app. So families, if you wanna track your kid,
Well, remember, we're not getting to the app yet. So the first step,
okay, so this is the
Yeah,
second
this is
layer.
just
is
the app is the second layer. So the first step, we have to get GPS on the buses, right? Am I
Yep.
saying
Yep.
that correctly?
Correct, yep.
Okay,
And
so,
if we have the right app, they allow advertising there.
So Art can put his face on everybody's phone all the time.
Numerous
It'd be
companies.
awesome.
Please-
Dousman can advertise for bus drivers, you name it.
Let's hope not. Okay. Anyone else?
so we're looking just for the first step, right?
Alrighty. Yep.
Yep.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. Next up, committee reports, Learning Committee, PVMS curricular updates.
Okay. So the minutes from the Learning Committee are in your packet. If I had flipped to it, I would have the page. So starting on page 20, we tackled many topics. We already talked about one, which was the academic standards. But we started with the Parkview curriculum updates. We reviewed a few course curricula that have been worked on by the Parkview staff so far. And then at the August 14th meeting, we'll have a number of additional curriculum items to share with the group. Tim Lemke presented some information on AODA, or alcohol and other drug curriculum, that we'll be working together with the Addiction Resource Council on. It's a series of 4 lessons that will supplement what we're already doing, and those will be delivered through the Phi-Ed program. He also shared some information about inclusive practices and co-teaching in special education, which basically means including students in special education within the regular classroom as opposed to providing pull-out services. So we'll definitely be continuing to move in that direction. We also talked about the physical education credit for athletics. After examining the requirements that the legislation puts forth, the committee did not want to pursue that anymore. So I know, Todd, that was something that you had brought up, but we discussed it pretty lengthy. I don't know if any of the 3 of you want to say anything more about that, but just didn't seem like it was.
It was a lot of work.
For the return on it, probably doesn't outweigh the complicated nature of the process.
That's a good way to explain.
Todd, talk to the microphone, please.
I know my son at one time did the online thing. Can they still do the online thing and just log in all their own stuff and do it that way?
So the online FIED works a little bit differently. It sounds like you're referring to the independent FIED, which was what we used to offer. We now have an online FIED course through Focus Fitness as a part of the PEP grant, which is more wellness focused. So it's not just like logging time. There's some actual content involved, but we do still offer a summer. Actually, it's summer online FIED, and we've actually run it during the school year now because there's been enough interest. So we do offer that as an option for kids.
You say how much extra work are we talking about for offering using the sports thing?
Using the sports, well, I don't know if you saw in the learning committee packet, I put in all of the questions that we would have to answer if we wanted to create a policy that would address this. And so there's a lot of questions that you have to be willing to come up with guidelines for. So which activities count? So that's a pretty big debate, right? Because some activities like marching band is a pretty physical activity. Does that count? So you have to trudge through all that, and then what if somebody drops or gets injured in the sport that they were counting for their FIED? In addition, the way the legislation is written, which in my opinion is probably a poor choice by the legislature, but it's not a strict substitution of athletics for a half a credit. So first of all, it's capped at a half a credit for your whole high school career. So all you can do is substitute one FIED course within high school. You can't you can't count football every year for your FIED credit. You can only do it once. And it's actually, all it does is it allows you to substitute that FIED credit with an additional English, math, science, social studies, or health course. So by substituting football for FIED, you have to sign up for an additional core academic course. You can't substitute that for a tech ed course or an art course. So it's just not real great.
Nikki, recommendation is it's not worth the, okay.
As a committee, that's kind of what got us thinking that, oh, if they're allowed to use a sport for this half credit and then they can take one of our great electives, that makes sense. But then when we found out you just have to put in another core academic, another science or another English or another something, we were kind of like, then it's not worth the work. If it were going to get them another opportunity for an elective, we probably would have talked at much greater length. But to just take another science or history class.
I think we spend too much time on it now. Sorry, Nick. Great job, though.
Most kids take that extra core class, though, don't they? Anyway? 9 out of many of the athletes, I'm assuming, are preparing for college and taking 4 years of math, 4 years of whatever. There's no requirement for, as they're already doing it.
Again, as we talked, it only allows them to do that for 1/2 credit over their whole high school career. So I don't know what to say. Okay, we already talked about the academic standards, and we'll actually talk more in August about the Education for Employment, or the ACP. That'll come to the school board for approval. Our ACP plan, and Dustin Lehman and I will be talking to the Learning Committee on August 14th, and then we'll bring that here to the full board at the end of August for approval. So that's it. Anything else, Cherry? Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay. All right, next up.
Finance and Facilities Committee.
Finance and Facilities?
Should be pretty
I'm
brief.
behind. All right, student transportation update.
All right, so we talked about several things transportation related at our finance facilities. We talked about some changes that occurred with route modifications and whatnot, and the committee would like to be updated on any changes that are additions that are not safety related going forward. So we talked about that, and that's something we'll do. Just for informational purposes, we talked about the last 3 years of expenditures, our GPS pilot, which we already discussed, our history of rate increases with Dousman and/or Hanks. So we kind of covered all things transportation at that last meeting there.
All right.
Is there any questions on any of that stuff?
Yeah, I would just want to comment, I was very impressed with Dousman going, it seemed like there was a whole different attitude of addressing issues before they got to the board level in the goofy committee meetings that we always had to say, yeah, it fits in policy, even though it was not a smart or compassionate decision to make. And I just like the way they're doing it. They're aggressive. They're looking out for the kids first. It seems like for a change, it's great.
How about
I
new
just like
buses?
that
That's a
attitude.
bonus.
Yeah, no, I just like the attitude, all the changes, they jumped on it right away.
All right, anyone else? All right. We're moving on. Unfinished business, superintendent evaluation training.
Kurt, did you have anything for the project update?
I can give you a 5-second update if you want. All right. Painting is on the second floor. We're crunch time right now. They're working overtime to get us to the start of school. They're confident yet, which is good. The painting is starting up on the second floor next week. Parking lot on the east side is curb and gutter is going in right now and should be paved next week. Should be pouring the gym floor. If it's not next week, it'll be the following week. We'll be pouring the gym floor. So there's a lot going on. There's a little over 100 guys on site and working Saturdays. So
How's the library?
library is coming along. The masonry work is done in there. They're putting the underslab electric in right now. So that'll be the last piece that will be finished. So before the summer even started, we had anticipated that they'll probably be doing punch lists that first week of school, not being a classroom. We put that as we put everything else as a higher priority as far as classrooms. So, but that's coming along. So overall, there's challenges every day, but we work through them and we're getting there.
Kurt, how many is that PAC gonna hold? Cause it doesn't look that big. It looks huge, tall, but how many is it gonna hold?
It'll be 800.
Awesome.
800.
So at least a class and a half, to almost 2 classes will fit in there if you want to.
And there's actually, they'll start putting curtain wall framing out, so where you see the precast now, actually the wall is further out from that. That'll be like the lobby area. There'll be a lot of glass in there, so. Yeah, the re-roofing portion of the project is about 60% done, so actually meeting with them tomorrow to get a progress update from them. So
they're on schedule where they need to be to start school in August.
yes.
August 28th.
August 28th.
Which is, I put that in one of my updates last week. That's our next full board meeting, and we'd like to give the board a tour prior to the meeting, and so I think we'll just meet at the high school on the 28th. And I can't remember, did we say 6:30 for the tour?
6:15, I thought.
6:15, okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember. And
Alright.
if you can't make that early time, that's no problem. We'll give you a tour whenever you'd like.
And then have the meeting at the school?
We're gonna have the meeting at the school, yeah, room 15. I'm confident that will,
That's the first day of school.
that is the first day of school, yes.
For
Yes, it is.
freshmen only there.
Well, at the high
Freshmen
school,
only,
yes, it's
yes.
freshman only. At Parkview, it'll be 7th grade only, and then K through 6. 4K through 6, sorry.
Jeff?
I just wanted to follow up on the last item on financing facilities, just as a conversation Brian did discuss that they're looking at all the elementary schools as far as what the possible fencing or
Yes.
landscaping or whatever.
I think there's a
could
sheet
be
in here,
done.
Jeff. I think there's a sheet.
Is it in there?
There, it is,
Yeah.
Okay.
we're moving forward with I think the top priority was Prairie View, and there was some concerns there. So we're moving forward with a solution at Prairie View, and then Brian will come to Finance and Facilities with more details on the other schools on August 14.
I think we're on the 21st.
Oh, you guys are on the 21st? Yeah, Nick's on
Yeah,
the
there's
14th. So 21st, sorry.
Jeff, maybe it was on the email from Laura, maybe, but I saw it in there somewhere.
Yeah, last page, page 41, we give an
Page
outline there
41.
Oh,
of
there it
what's
is.
going on at Prairie View.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
The
yeah.
additions we'd like to make are noted in yellow. The existing fence lines in blue, so that's the battle plan. We're just giving you an update as to what we are doing right now, okay?
All right.
Okay, great. And then all I have, Tom, you're done, right?
I'm good.
Yep.
Good.
Kurt, thanks. Nick, thanks.
Thank you.
All I have is that there is no budget yet from the state. And so we have an article at the table for you to read if you haven't read it already, but still no progress on the transportation piece. So Andy said he talked to Senator Nass's office today and no progress, nothing up to date there. So we'll just wait and see.
To try to figure it out.
Mhm.
So now it's crunch time.
Yeah, it is
The
crunch time.
The
So-
major budget building pieces that we know of are still on the table. There has been absolutely no mention whatsoever of those things leaving. So it's other issues that need to be settled, but I feel pretty good about all things
Yeah.
communicated thus far.
Transportation is the hot button right now in the budget.
But as you can see from the article, when you get time to read it, if you haven't already, latest state budget plan increases money for schools, but local taxpayers share costs. So they're talking about revenue cap relief, but that does mean that we'd have to increase taxes, property taxes at the local level. So it does not sound like right now they won't, they'll raise the revenue cap, but they won't give us the accompanying state aid to soften the blow. So wait and see.
Okay.
And then, if we're all ready, we can, we're gonna turn off the microphones, we're gonna turn off the camera, and we'll start the superintendent training. But I wanna introduce John Eichhold. John is working for CISA 6 right now.
No.
No, we won't, I think we can
We're gonna
adjourn
keep
at the
going.
end. Is
We'll
that, or
adjourn,
do you
yeah.
wanna adjourn now? It doesn't make any difference to us.
I can motion to adjourn. I think we should adjourn.
Okay,
I make
that
a
works.
motion to adjourn.
2-minute break, maybe?
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
And discussion?
Oh, we're gonna adjourn? Okay. All right. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?